All right, shalom, family. Before we start, let's make sure you can hear us and see us nice and clearly. Then afterwards, we'll get right into our lesson. There's quite a few things we want to discuss in this particular topic that we're going into today, which is a very important topic. But first, let's make sure you can hear us and see us nice and clearly. Okay, good. Tawab. And bless you and shalom to you, brother and Elder Dell, and your family. I also would like to say shalom to everyone who is currently viewing this broadcast, as well as those who will come across this in the future. Because this is the Sabbath, we're going to start off with the Hebrew Credo of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. And afterwards, we'll get right into the lesson. Shema Yasha'Allah Ahaya Alahaya Nawa Ahaya Akkad.
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 Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. So brothers and sisters, again, for those who are new, those who are not familiar with what we just stated, what we said in Hebrew was, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, which again comes from the reference of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 in the Bible. Now to get into our discussion, our Sabbath lesson. We're going to be covering a topic which is titled, The Invisible Workings in Our Lives. Again, the title of tonight's or this morning's discussion is The Invisible Workings in Our Lives. Before we go into it, we're just going to read the introduction so that we can all be on the same page as to what we're dealing with. And then also I will just give a little bit of background as to how we're going to attack this topic today. Okay. So Brother Shapad, if you can just read the brief introduction before we get into the information.
Okay. Here it says there is an actively functioning spiritual world all around us which we can't see, which influences our day-to-day goings. The closer we get to the end, the more we are connected to the carnal and physical world, as opposed to the world which truly governs the physical. Let us take a look at the unseen world for a moment in order to remind ourselves of its existence in a time where we tend to forget it due to the distractions of the world.
Right. So that's the overall message of this particular topic. Getting back to understanding the spiritual world around us. As it was stated eloquently, of course, we give all praise to the Most High Ahaya for Brother and Elder Rawchaa who put the information together. As he eloquently stated, in the time in which we're becoming closer or we're coming closer to the end times, we tend to focus more or get entrapped in the physical aspects of the world around us, the events that are taking place, the impositions within our community, which we're going to talk about in depth today, and how we actually contribute to some of the impositions in our community, whether it be from government, the police, from the educational field, the medical field. Of course, we know that Satan and his ministers, the nations, are responsible for performing some of the actions we see in our communities. But there's an underlying undercurrent thing that's not being addressed, which is the spiritual aspect and the part we play in the spiritual aspect that allows the impositions to come in. And we're going to give many examples according to biblical history to show that anytime we allow ourselves to be entrapped, whether according to sin, breaking God's commandments, falling to things which are not in agreement and in accordance with the way of righteousness, the Most High always allows the nations to come in and do certain things to us. Now, the issue, getting back to the topic, the issue is that sometimes we more so focus on just the fact that, for example, a policeman just shot someone down in cold blood in the streets, or an innocent bystander was hurt due to some particular action that took place in our community. Well, we're going to show you again the part that we potentially play in allowing these things to happen. But before we get into it, we're first going to discuss the fact that there is a such thing as a spiritual realm and a spiritual world that is operating amongst us, around us, above us, beneath us, right beside us. And to show that, we're going to start off in the book of Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, because this gets straight to the point of showing us that there is a war taking place and that this war is a spiritual war. Of course, it manifests itself in the physical, but its origins are spiritual. So, Brother Shapat, if we can start in the book of Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. And we're going to take it down to verse 18.
Okay. Ephesians 6 and verse 12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against the spiritual wickedness in high places.
Right.
Wherefore.
Right. So this is the ultimate battle. So in the midst of all the physical ramifications and the physical things that take place on a day-to-day basis that may be seen as impositions against us and, a war or an agenda against us, we must always remember that this war begins in the spiritual realm. So the scriptures say we wrestle not against flesh and blood. And I think it's very profound that a few weeks ago, you, Brother Shapat, along with Elder Rawchaa, went into a lesson titled Witches Among Us, or going into witches and warlocks, so on and so forth, and how they affect us in our daily lives. So I think with this topic, we want to expound on that information of not only witches among us, but how, by us allowing the witchcraft to exist amongst us, how it affects us as a whole community and eventually as a nation. So again, the scriptures say what? We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against what?
Against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
Against spiritual wickedness in high places. So like with any war, because again, the Bible says we wrestle not. To wrestle means to battle, to war. So because we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, and of course, the Bible is stating that this is a war, like dealing with any war, we must find a way in which we can protect ourselves. So the question is, how do you protect yourself from a spiritual enemy? How do you guard yourself and defend yourself in a spiritual battle? Because in a physical battle, what do? We get guns, we get grenades, we get shields, bulletproof vests, tanks, and all these different physical forms of artillery and protection in order to battle against a seen enemy, okay, or a visible enemy. But again, how do we prepare in a battle against a spiritual, unseen enemy? Well, the scripture is going to give us that instruction. Verse 13.
Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of the Most High, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness.
Right. So verse 13 says, wherefore take on the whole armor of God. Meaning that the Most High, understanding that this is a spiritual battle, the Most High have given us a spiritual armor to protect and defend ourselves in this battle. So it says, take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day. Meaning that you'll be able to withstand and protect yourself and defend yourself in the evil day, in the day of this evil battle. Against what? Against the rulers, the principalities and powers and darkness of this world, and against the spiritual wickedness in high places. Right? And having done all, to stand. Meaning having done all, to overcome. Right? Verse 14.
Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness.
Right. So this is our spiritual defense mechanism. This is our spiritual artillery. It says, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness. So a bulletproof vest will only get you so far in this battle, in these last days. If you don't have this spiritual breastplate of righteousness, then you're pretty much taking a shot in the dark. Okay? You're dealing with a small aspect of the battle. Maybe 20 to 30% of the battle is physical, with the rest, the majority of this battle being physical or spiritual. Okay? So it says, standing, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness. Go ahead.
And your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace.
And your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. This is your spiritual defense mechanism. Right? Go ahead.
Verse 16. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. And take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of the Most High, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints.
Absolutely. So, of course, people may ask, well, do we make physical preparations? And the answer is absolutely yes. But the reality is that without spiritual preparation, those physical preparations are null and void. They can only get you but so far.
Right.
So first and foremost, we're establishing the fact that there is a spiritual world, a spiritual realm operating around us. And not only is it operating around us, it's actually at war with us. So as we go through this, we're going to expound a little bit more and more on this concept. But again, we're just laying the groundwork to show, according to scripture, the existence of the spiritual world. So to expound, let's go to the book of Genesis chapter 18, verse 13. And we're going to take this down to about verse 22.
Okay. Genesis 18. Starting at 13?
Yep, we can start at verse 13 and take it down to verse 22.
Okay. Genesis chapter 18 and verse 13. And the Most High said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I of a surety bear a child, which am old? Is anything too hard for the Most High? At the time appointed I will return unto thee, according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. And he said, Nay, but thou didst laugh. Mm-hmm. And the men rose up from thence and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Most High said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Most High, to do justice and judgment, that the Most High may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him.
Right.
Verse 20.
So what made Abraham stand out before the Most High so much that the Most High consulted with him concerning the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah? Like, there was something about Abraham that was so righteous in the eyes of God that the Most High found it fit that before he sends judgment on this place, which deserved judgment, he thought that it would be best to consult with the man who he had newly made a covenant with, which was Abraham. So now, what made Abraham stand out again? Let's go back to verse 18 and 19.
Genesis
in fact,
18.
Started verse 16.
Genesis 18 and 16. And the men rose up from thence and looked toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Most High...
Right. So it says the men, meaning the angels, because when you read the full story, these were angels visiting the house or the tent of Abraham. So it says the men rose up, meaning the angels rose up from thence and looked toward Sodom. Now, regardless if you are a Bible believer or not, you can't help but see the similarities between what the Bible says about Sodom and Gomorrah and the wickedness that took place within Sodom and Gomorrah. You can't help but make the comparison between that place and modern day Sodom and Gomorrah, known as America. And that's regardless if you believe the Bible or not. There's no way you can't read that story and not be pricked in your conscience and say, well, the same things that were indicative of Sodom's judgment are the same exact things that are going on in America. So in the midst of that, you had Abraham, who the Most High again consulted with and asked him and he revealed it unto him. In fact, he said, shall I hide this thing from Abraham? Understanding that this is the man that I'm making my covenant with. And that what? Let's read verse 19. In fact, verse 18.
I'll do 17. And the Most High said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him.
So understanding that Abraham will become a great and mighty nation, and that all the nations of the earth shall be blessed through him, meaning that Abraham would serve as a standard. His righteousness and his faith would serve as a standard by which all nations shall be blessed and shall follow as an example. So if he's going to be the example of a righteous and faithful man in the eyes of God, surely I should let him know what's about to take place in Sodom. Read on.
Verse 19. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Most High to do justice and judgment, that the Most High may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of.
Right.
Verse
So, Lawya, what made Abraham stand out is the fact that he said he will command, the Most High said, I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him. And they shall keep the way of the Lord and do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. So we know that not only would Abraham uphold the standard of righteousness in the earth, he understood that Abraham would teach the same standard to his children, so that his children can carry on this standard of righteousness. So now the question is, again, I made the comparison between Sodom and Gomorrah and modern day America. And even the Bible makes that comparison in the book of Revelations, I believe the 11th chapter, correct me if I'm wrong, Revelations 11, where it speaks of that place which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt. So if we're seeing this biblical comparison, and even outside of just the biblical comparison, just doing an everyday comparison of Sodom and America, what can we draw from this in understanding how the Most High deals with judgment, the invisible realm, so on and so forth? Well, if the Most High is destined to judge America like he did Sodom, what side of that judgment will we fall on based on where we stand with the Most High God? Either we stand on the side of the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah, or we stand on the side of faith and righteousness of our forefather Abraham. Now, the question is, if we're not falling on the side of righteousness and faith as faithful Abraham, and we're falling on the side of Sodom and Gomorrah, what can we expect to happen to us within our communities? Do we expect the blessings that come with Abraham to take place in our communities? Or should we expect the same judgment that befell Sodom and Gomorrah? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because as we start to bring these things up to date and we do a comparison between what's actually taking place in our communities, like, we can't turn on the TV or, flick on the news without hearing about a new case or a new situation in which something happens to someone within the Black community, losing their lives, whether to disease, police violence, brutality, so on and so forth. And yes, we feel for our people who are going through these things, but there's a conversation that's not being sparked in the midst of all this that's taking place.
Right.
Like, why is the Most High allowing these things to take place? Why has the Most High removed the hedge from our people, which will allow the police to come in and do certain things to us in our communities, or to allow people to come in and abort our children and give us diseases and push drugs in the community, so on and so forth? What are we doing? What are we complicit with that's allowing these things to happen? Well, brothers and sisters, we're going to find out that as a community, as a whole, we're actually on the side of Sodom and Gomorrah and are contrary or adverse to the ways of faithful, righteous Abraham. So we discovered, let's move on into verse 20. We've now discovered that the Most High, through his angels, is revealing to Abraham the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. So let's read on verse 20.
Verse 20. Genesis 18 and 20. And the Most High said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know.
Right. So let's replace Sodom and Gomorrah with America. And the Lord said, because the cry of America is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know it. So the supplications and the prayers and the cries of the people who live within Sodom, who are not necessarily in agreement with the way of that society and the way that things were taking place, their cries had made their way up to the throne of the Most High God. So the Most High went and made diligent inquisition through his angels to figure out whether these things were so. So the same way this was done in Sodom and Gomorrah, surely the Most High is making a diligent inquisition of America to figure out whether these things are so. So again, the question is, when he comes and as he makes diligent inquisition, as he sends his angels to inquire of this place, as he sends messengers to inquire of this place, where will we be found when they come, when they arrive? Because we're going to go into the scriptures and show you that the angels are amongst us being entertained, or the angels are amongst us unaware. We don't even know that on a daily basis we come in contact with the spiritual realm. But we're going to go into that. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. Let's read on. Let's finish this out in verse 22.
22. If I can add a little something as well. It seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, Elder Lawya, but it seems to me there's no coincidence in us reading Ephesians 6 and then jumping back to Genesis. It seems to me as if Abraham was doing exactly what's written in Ephesians 6 by, protecting himself from that spiritual world or that spiritual attack.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that point up, because I want to get back to Ephesians to actually make that comparison to see where do we as a whole, I'm not just talking about individuals within the church, within an organization, I'm talking about as a whole, as a community, as a nation, where do we fall on the spectrum? So let's go back to Ephesians, since you mentioned it, and let's see if we fit this particular description or standard of what one must do in order to protect themselves from this oncoming onslaught of the children of Israel. Let's go to Ephesians 6 and let's start at verse 12. Let's start from the top.
Okay. Ephesians 6 and 12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore,
now this is what we're warring against. So the question is, are we as a community and as a nation, are we aware that this is an actual war that's taking place? And if we are aware, are we actually giving our power over? We're going to discuss this throughout the course of this lesson. Are we actually in alignment with the same spirits that are at war with us? Like, are we in alignment with the principalities and powers and the rulers of darkness of this world and spiritual wickedness in high places?
Or have we compromised?
Exactly. Have we been compromised to accept and to trust in the principalities, the powers, and the rulers of the darkness of this world and the spiritual wickedness in high places? you're going to find out that both knowingly and unknowingly, we have both been compromised and have accepted the same spiritual entities and the same spiritual deities which are at war with us. Now, some have in fact, I'm going to save that as we go through this, but let's go to verse 13.
Okay, Ephesians 6:13. Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of the Most High, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand.
So the question is, have we taken on the whole armor of God? That we may be able to withstand the evil day. And if you're not taking on the whole armor of God, what are you shielding yourself with? What is your shield? What is your protection? What is your method of standing against the spiritual wickedness in high places in this evil day? Again, you're going to find out that some of our brothers and sisters have openly accepted and have attempted to use that spiritual darkness and that spiritual wickedness in high places as a cloak or a shield to protect themselves in this evil day. Verse 14.
Verse 14. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and
So
your feet
your loins girt about with what?
with truth.
With truth. So the Bible says, it tells us that there's either two ways, either good or evil, righteousness or unrighteousness. And there's either truth or lies. So if you're not girt about with truth, then automatically you've shielded yourself with a lie. And we're going to go into that. Okay? So what lies have our people shielded themselves with in hope to protect themselves, either knowingly or unknowingly? Having the breastplate of righteousness. The question is, where can you find the standard of righteousness? Where can you find the standard of truth? In the Bible. So if you don't believe the Bible, if you don't trust the Bible, then automatically the shield that you've taken up, or the girding of your loins, and the breastplate of righteousness that you're supposed to shield yourself with, has already been damaged, is already useless. Okay? Why? Because it's not the protection that God is offering. It's not the protection that the Most High have promised us. All right? We're going to go into that. Verse 15.
And your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of the Most High.
Right.
Praying,
so let me ask this question before you continue. Out of this whole chapter, or these references that we've read, have we heard that we must take on the shield of Christianity, the shield of Catholicism, the shield of Islam, the shield of black consciousness, the shield of voodoo, black magic, and all these other things that people resort to as a shield or protection from the things that plague them on a daily basis? Not once did the Most High mention to shield yourself with religion, a belief system, to shield yourself with so-called quote unquote consciousness, black consciousness, Africanism, so on and so forth. So if you're trying to shield yourself with those particular things, again, there's a chink in your armor. All right. Verse 18.
Verse 18. praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints.
Right. So praying always with prayer and supplication in the Spirit, meaning continual prayer, continual meditation on the word of the Most High God. And watching thereunto, meaning watching for the signs that are mentioned in the word of the Most High God. So again, if you don't even believe in the word of the Most High God enough to go into it to try to see what the signs are, to see what to look for or what to watch for in the last days as preparation, then you have a chink in your armor. All right? Your battle gear is defective. It's like you went and bought yourself a bulletproof vest or a gun that either doesn't protect you from bullets or shield you from bullets as it should, or a gun that gets locked or jammed anytime you try to use it to defend yourself. It's useless. So this is what we do when we put away the only thing that can give us the understanding of how to protect ourselves in these last days, in these times, and we substitute it with either a religion, which the Bible doesn't teach a religion. We have to make that clear. When we try to shield it with some type of spiritual system like voodoo, Santeria, Shango, or whatever the case may be, when we try to shield ourselves with so-called scholarship and so-called archaeology and black consciousness and all these other things that people go into, when you shield yourself with those things, then your battle gear is defective.
I want to add another one to that too. When we shield ourselves with economic success without the foundation of the Bible, that too, you know.
Absolutely. You hear that a lot, that the answer to our problem as black people is economic freedom. We're going to touch on that also, right? Economic freedom. If you're trying to shield yourself against this evil day with just economic freedom, then your battle gear is defective. So when those fiery darts come, and fiery darts, Shapat, sometimes you go and you watch some of these old films which are based in medieval times and which they were still using bows and arrows in ancient times when they used bows and arrows. You notice that sometimes they will light the tip of the arrow on fire and then shoot it off to the enemy.
Right.
That's the ancient concept of what we call today missiles.
Right.
All right. That's where they get that concept of missiles from. But nonetheless, when the Bible says fiery darts, it's talking about an arrow that has been lit on fire and shot towards you in order to either break down your defense, to break down your armor, or altogether just eliminate you.
Right.
So when these fiery darts are being shot and you have economic success as your shield, as the Bible says, take on the shield of faith. But if you don't have the shield of faith, you have the shield of black consciousness. You have the shield of Christianity, the shield of Islam, the shield of Roman Catholicism, the shield of economic freedom or economic success. Then those fiery darts are going to pierce right through your shield, right through your defense. It's useless. It'd be as if you just took a piece of paper and tried to hold it up to a bow and arrow lit on fire as a form of protection. Right? So, Shapat, I'm glad you brought up that point as far as Ephesians 6 and showing that Abraham actually fulfilled what we read of in Ephesians 6 and therefore was considered to be a friend of God, the father of the covenant, and eventually the father of the Christ. Let's move on to the book of Hebrews 13. Again, we're laying the groundwork showing that the spiritual realm is operating amongst us. And if the spiritual realm is operating amongst us, what should we do in preparation as a form of protection in this spiritual battle? Let's go to the book of Hebrews 13 and 1 through 2.
Hebrews 13. Is it okay if I mention one more thing in Ephesians?
Yep.
Hebrews 13. Okay. The other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he was also doing Abraham. When you read down in the story in Genesis 18, you know, is can you find 50? Can you find this amount? Ephesians 6 says, praying always for the saints. So he was praying for Lot. You know. Exactly.
And that's another good point. And we're going to stay in Hebrews 13 because if we, you know, we can go back.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. We can go back and forth on just those 2 chapters alone and just have that the whole lesson.
Right.
But that is a good point. The fact that the Most High, Abraham even made supplication for the saints, the possible saints of the land of Sodom. Right. Instead of just saying, well, Lord, you know better. The land of Sodom is wicked. It needs to be judged. Instead of him taking that stance, he instead, understanding that Lot was there and that Lot himself was a man of righteousness, he said, Lord, will you destroy a whole country if there's at least 50 righteous men in this country?
Right.
And then he got the Most High. He said, peradventure, Lord, you know, he got it down to one individual. If there's one righteous in this city, will you destroy this city? And the Most High said, well, Abraham, for your sake, I won't touch that city if there's one righteous. Well, come to find out that when the Most High went through the place, the angels, the messengers that were sent to inquire diligently to see whether the things were so in Sodom and Gomorrah, they themselves became victims of the evils and the wickedness and the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. The men of Sodom came out to rape, or an attempt to rape, the angels. So when that took place, they said, listen, Lot, get your family together. Let everyone know who is under your house that this place is about to be destroyed. Lot started taking, you know how, sometimes, when things are coming down the pipe, we procrastinate and we looking, let me get this, let me get that, let me make sure. So Lot is trying to get everything and trying to get things together. The angel's like, listen, this guy's taking too long. By the time we finish, hey, the kingdom will be here by the time Lot is finished trying to figure out what he's going to take with him. So they said, Lot, we're just going to take you and your family into a safe place, and we're going to destroy this whole city. So, as we mentioned earlier, let's substitute Sodom for America. And based on scripture, we don't even have to make, to make a plea for those who may be righteous within this place. Because believe it or not, according to what we read in scripture, the judgment of America has already been sown.
Right.
The judgment is sown. There's no pleading whether there's 50 righteous. Because if there is 50 righteous, then the Most High gives those 50 righteous people instruction. Flee out of the midst of Babylon.
Right. Exactly.
That's the instruction for the 50 righteous in America. Right? But we're going to get into that also later. Let's move on to the book of Hebrews 13 and 1 through 2.
Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 1. Let brotherly love continue. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares.
Right. So again, the scriptures is letting us know that the spiritual realm is operating amongst us on a daily basis. The same way those angels came to the house of Lot. When they came, Lot didn't know that they were angels. He just thought that they were strangers. When they came to the house of Abraham, Abraham didn't know that they were angels. He just thought that they were strangers. But because he was a righteous man, because they were both righteous men, and they followed the ancient customs of taking in strangers and making sure they had what they needed to continue on their journey, this allowed them to open their house to these men who turned out to be the angels of God. And because of that, they were blessed. And in the case of Lot, his very life was saved because he opened his house and let brotherly love continue, in the sense that he opened his house to these strangers who turned out to be angels. And these were the men who eventually saved his life, or the angels that saved his life. All right. Let's go to the book of 2 Maccabees, chapter 3, and we'll start at verse 8. Then afterwards, we'll start to go into the second part, which is, well, if this is the case, if there is a spiritual warfare taking place, and if the Most High has angels and spirits around us operating, why is it that certain things are allowed to happen? We're going to touch on that. But before we do, let's go to the book of 2 Maccabees, chapter 3. We're going to start at verse 8 and take it down to verse 29.
2 Maccabees in the Apocrypha, chapter 3 and verse 8. So forthwith Heliodorus took his journey under a color of visiting the cities of Seleucia and Phoenice, but indeed to fulfill the king's purpose. And when he was come to Jerusalem and had been courteously received of the high priest of the city, he told him what intelligence was given of the money, and declared wherefore he came, and asked if these things were so indeed.
Right.
Then the high
just to give a little bit of background history, Heliodorus was, I believe, he was the treasurer of Antiochus Epiphanes. So what happened was, I believe his name was Simon, an Israelite by the name of Simon from the tribe of Benjamin, who told Antiochus of monies that were being kept and stored in the temple. And he promised Antiochus this money, that if Antiochus could raise him up to the position of high priest, which really a Benjamite was not supposed to serve as high priest, right. But this man was willing to deal with a backroom deal with Antiochus in order to be raised up as high priest, right? Same way politicians today, they go before the magistrates or go before those in high government position, and they ask them, well, there's a particular position I want over my community or over my jurisdiction. If you can promise me this position, I'll make sure you get this amount of money towards your campaign or whatever the case may be. Right. So this is what happened with Simon the Benjamite and Antiochus Epiphanes. So Antiochus sent his treasurer to Jerusalem to inquire about this money. So it says, Heliodorus told him of the intelligence that was given of the money and declared wherefore he came. So he let him know that, okay, I know that you guys have some money here. There's a certain amount of gold and silver. I'm here for this money. Right? Read on.
Verse 10. Then the high priest told him that there was such money laid up for the relief of widows and fatherless children.
Right. And so this was the purpose of that money being stored up in the temple. It was for the relief of widows and fatherless children. Right? Verse 11.
And that some of it belonged to Hyrcanus, son of Tobias, a man of great dignity, and not as that wicked Simon had misinformed.
Right.
The sum whereof in all was 400 talents of silver and 200 of gold.
So this is how much money was kept and stored up in the temple. So some of it was for the relief of widows and fatherless children, and some of it belonged to Hyrcanus, son of Tobias, which was considered a great man of dignity. Right? Verse 12.
12. And that it was altogether impossible that such wrongs should be done unto them that had committed it to the holiness of the place, and to the majesty and inviolable sanctity of the temple, honored over all the world.
Right. So in other words, it's impossible for us to do wrong to those who entrusted the temple with their money, such as those who gave money towards the widows and the fatherless, along with this great man of dignity, Hyrcanus, son of Tobias. Like if we decided to go into the temple and give you this money, we would be pretty much slighting all those who contributed towards this money. So it's impossible for us to do so. We can't give you this money,
right,
or this gold and silver. Go ahead.
Verse 13. But Heliodorus, because of the king's commandment given him, said that in any wise it must be brought into the king's treasury. So at the day which he appointed, he entered in to order this matter. Wherefore there was no small agony throughout the whole city.
So Heliodorus stated that I don't care where this money comes from, who it belongs to. All I know is that this money, by the time we leave, must be committed over to the king, which was King Antiochus. That's the only thing we care about, is transferring this money and putting it within the king's treasury. So because of that, it says there was no small agony throughout the whole city, meaning the whole city of Jerusalem was in agony based on this request. Verse 15.
But the priests, prostrating themselves before the altar in their priests' vestments, called unto heaven upon him that made a law concerning things given to be kept, that they should safely be preserved for such as had committed them to be kept.
So hold up. How did the priest react in this situation?
Right. Verse 15.
What did they do?
But the priests, prostrating themselves before the altar in their priest.
They went and did voodoo and black magic and resorted unto sorcerers and sorceresses in order to get protection from Heliodorus.
But the priests, prostrating themselves before the altar in their
they went and got rosary beads and crosses and holy water and started saying Hail Mary, full of grace, in hopes that Heliodorus would leave them alone.
Before the altar.
No, they worship towards the Kaaba and hope that Allah would save them from the attacks of Heliodorus.
But the priests, prostrating themselves before the altar. So
they prostrated themselves, meaning they bowed themselves in humility before the altar of God. Right? So this was how, and we're going to see how they got resolved in a solution in this matter of both agony and pain amongst the people of Jerusalem. Right? Read on.
But the priests, prostrating themselves before the altar in their priests' vestments, called unto heaven upon him that made a law concerning things given to be kept, that they should safely be preserved for such as had committed them to be kept.
Right. So they called unto heaven upon him that made a law concerning things to be given to he kept, or to be kept. Meaning they prayed before the Most High. because he was the one who created the law as far as storing things in the temple, so on and so forth, for the widows and the fatherless and so on and so forth. So they prayed to the God of heaven. Read on.
Verse 16. Then whoso had looked the high priest in the face, it would have wounded his heart, for his countenance and the changing of his color declared the inward agony of his mind.
Right. So there was so much agony and pain in the face of the high priest that anyone who was to look in their face and witness that pain and agony, just the sight of it would cause their hearts to fail and their hearts to be wounded. Right? Read on.
For the man was so compassed with fear and horror of the body that it was manifest to them that looked upon him what sorrow he had now in his heart. Others ran, flocking out of their houses to the general supplication, because the place was like to come into contempt.
Right. And so the others flocking out of their houses to the general supplication. So they went to the place of prayer and supplication, because the place was like to come into contempt. Right? Verse 19.
And the woman, girt with sackcloth under their breasts, abounded in the streets, and the virgins that were kept in ran, some to the gates and some to the walls, and others looked out of their windows. And all, holding their hands toward heaven, made supplication.
And verse all 20. Doing what?
And all, holding their hands toward heaven, made supplication.
So all holding their hands toward heaven made supplication. So instead of them resorting unto sorceresses and voodoo and, our people dealing with all types of madness, the chicken foot and putting 6-pointed stars in the middle of the floor and, all kinds of things our people deal with in these practices. Instead of doing all those things, they resorted to praying to the God of heaven and making supplication unto him. And they did this in order to receive not only an answer, but also protection from their enemies. Right? 23.
21. Then it would have pitted a man to see the falling down of the multitude of all sorts, and the fear of the high priests being in such an agony. Then they called upon the Almighty Lord to keep the things committed of trust safe and sure for those that had committed them. Nevertheless, Heliodorus executed that which was decreed. Now as he was there present himself
So check this out. As they were praying, Heliodorus executed that which was decreed. So he went and started to take the gold and the silver from the temple. So it's not like when they prayed, automatically Heliodorus was just struck down or whatever the case may be. He went forward with his plan.
Right.
So people have this perception about the Most High's judgment. Like people like to refer to the Most High as some type of sky daddy or sky genie where you just pray and automatically things just take place. Now, Heliodorus went forward with what he was trying to execute. Right? But in the midst of that, something happened which pretty much served as an answer and a response to the prayers of all the people who made supplication unto the Most High God. Verse 24.
Now as he was there present himself with his guard about the treasury, the Lord of spirits and the Prince of all power caused a great apparition, so that all that presumed to come in with him were astonished at the power of the Most High and fainted, and were sore afraid.
Right.
For
So
that,
as they started to go in about the treasury, it says that the Lord of spirits and the Prince of all power caused a great apparition, so that all that presumed to come in with him were astonished at the power of God, and fainted and were sore afraid. So the spirit of fear fell upon all the men who tried to go into the temple of God before the treasury and take that gold and silver. So the prayers were answered. Verse 25.
For there appeared unto them an horse with a terrible rider upon him, and adorned with a very fair covering. And he ran fiercely and smote at Heliodorus with his forefeet, and it seemed that he that sat upon the horse had complete harness of gold.
So the Most High, with this apparition, sent a white horse, a beautiful, greatly adorned white horse from the heavens, which came, and it says it struck Heliodorus with its forefeet, meaning its front feet. And it says that the rider of this horse seemed to be covered with a complete harness of gold. Right? Verse 26.
Moreover, 2 other young men appeared before him, notable in strength, excellent in beauty, and comely in apparel, who stood by him on either side, and scourged him continually, and gave him many sore stripes.
Right. So there were 2 young men on his side, which were 2 angels that began striking Heliodorus at his side. Right? So the Most High sent 2 angels to whoop Heliodorus's behind, right in the middle of the temple, of the court of the temple. Right? So this is the power we have invested through the Most High God, through prayer and supplication. Now, of course, the next question I'm pretty sure many people are going to ask, or people have been asking for time and time again. If this is the case, if the Bible is saying that if we pray to God and the Most High is going to send something from heaven to save us and so on and so forth, why isn't this happening today? Like when the police come into the community to shoot somebody, why don't the Most High send angels from heaven? Why don't he send the great horses from heaven and men covered in harnesses of gold? And why doesn't the Most High do these things today? Well, we're going to go into that, because let's examine this particular story. When these individuals came and made an imposition against the temple of God asking for this money, what was the response of the people? Did the people start an organization called Black Lives Matter, or, went throughout the streets saying no justice, no peace, or all the other things our people deal with when they face some of these social issues? What did the people do as a whole when they were presented with this opposition? Did they beg their oppressors for so-called freedom and equality, and beg their oppressor to stop beating them upside the head and murdering them and so on and so forth? Absolutely not. The first thing they did was went before the Most High God and made prayer and supplication as a whole, as a community, as a nation. Right? Secondly, we must examine the moral code and the moral compass of the people at this time period. Now, of course, we weren't perfect as a nation, but we had enough sense not to allow a murderer to operate amongst us freely without any level of judgment. We had enough sense not to allow prostitution and drug dealers and pedophiles to operate in our community without impunity. Because we understood, and of course there were times in which some of these things were allowed. But during this time of the Maccabees, this was a time in which we were getting back to a state of righteousness. And then you had the opposition amongst us, amongst our people, which were those who wanted to follow the ways of the Greeks. Right? So it was a clear distinction between those who wanted to follow righteousness and who were making a stand for righteousness, and those who wanted to follow paganism and wickedness. So we had enough sense amongst us not to allow iniquity to operate within our community and then try to turn around and pray to the Most High God and ask God, why is this happening to us? Why is this taking place? So now this is going to turn into modern times where a lot of things go on in our community from an external force, whether it be, again, the police, some form of government imposition or what have you. A lot of these things the Most High is allowing to take place because there's a lot of iniquity, there's a lot of evil going on within our communities that's not being addressed, that's not being dealt with. Whether it be drugs, murders and violence, prostitution, pedophilia, right? Paganism. A lot of these things are taking place in our community, and the Most High is sending forth judgment. Right? So let's finish off here in the book of Maccabees, the 3rd chapter, and then we'll move forward.
Okay. We're at 2 Maccabees 3:27. And Heliodorus fell suddenly unto the ground, and was compassed with great darkness. But they that were with him took him up, and put him into a litter. Thus him that lately came with a great train, and with all his guard, into the said treasury, they carried out, being unable to help himself with his weapons. And manifestly they acknowledged the power of the Most High.
So it says they carried him out. This man came in proud, boastful, telling the people that I can care less who's responsible for this money, this gold and this silver. It's coming back with me, and it's going into the treasury of the king. He came in so boastful, so proud. But by the time the Most High was finished with him, this man was not even able to hold his own weapon. The Most High had incapacitated him. And it was through the prayers and the supplications of the people that this judgment was brought forth. And the people crying before the Most High and turning themselves over to righteousness, which allowed the Most High to bring forth this judgment. Right? Verse 29.
29. For he, by the hand of the Most High, was cast down, and lay speechless, without all hope of life.
Wow. For by the hand of God he was cast down and lay speechless, without all hope of life. Like all hope of him living and making it through this whole ordeal was just gone. The Most High just zapped his spirit.
It sounds
and just
like
left
a KO.
him there, right. He left him KO'd, just sitting there, just wondering like, yo, am I going to make it through this situation based on what the Most High just did to me? Right? So this is the power we have with the invisible realm, with the spiritual forces of the Most High God. The question is, how often do we use it? How often when things come down the pipe do we get on our knees and pray to the Most High God and ask him for this protection and to ask him to guide us and to fight for us in these battles? And then on top of that, how many of us are addressing the issues in our community that's allowing the impositions to come or causing the impositions to come? Before we
Right.
go to our next scripture, let me give an example of that, because I know many brothers and sisters may be looking at this, and I know that there may be others who may be new to this truth and new to this understanding, and they're asking us, why are we putting the focus on the people who are being quote unquote victimized and not pointing the finger at the victimizers? That's what we hear a lot, right? You're blaming the victims, right? Well, that's not the case. We're not blaming the victims in this situation. What we're saying is that there's a reason why a hedge, which is supposed to be about us, remember, the Most High said, take upon you the whole armor of God. So there's an armor, a protection, a defense mechanism that should be around our communities, that should be around us as individuals, but doesn't exist. The question is why? Let's give one example through scripture. Let's go to the 1 Kings, the 11th chapter, and let's get, we're going to start a few verses in the beginning at verse 1. We're going to take it down to about verse 1 Kings 11. We'll start at verse 1. We'll take it down to about verse 6. And then we'll jump straight to the point at verse 9. Yeah, let's start at verse 11 and take it down to verse. Let's start at chapter 11, verse 1.
Okay. 1 Kings 11 and 1. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, woman of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites, of the nations concerning which the Most High said unto the children of Israel, ye shall not go in to them, neither shall they come in unto you. For surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it
so
came
his
to
wives turned away his heart from serving the Most High God. Right? So we all know the story of Solomon. Right? His wives turned away his heart from serving the Most High God. So because of this, what did King Solomon begin to resort to? He left the worship of the Most High God. So what was now the substitution? What did he replace the service and worship of God with? Let's see.
Verse 4. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods. And
so
his heart,
wives turned away his heart from other or to other gods. So his heart was moved from the worship of the Most High God, as his father David was a profound worshiper, righteous worshiper of the Most High God. He lost that zeal of his father David, and his heart was turned over to other gods. Let's see what came with the worship of these gods. Go ahead.
and his heart was not perfect with the Most High his power, as was the heart of David his father. Verse 5. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites.
So he went after Ashtoreth, Salakia. He went after Ashtoreth, the goddess. We hear that a lot. We hearing that a lot in our communities nowadays. Goddess this, goddess that. I'm a goddess, right? Well, these are the same things that caused Solomon to turn away or turn his heart from the Most High God, worshiping goddesses. Okay? So if this activity is found in our community, then we can expect the same exact thing that happened to Solomon to happen within our communities. So if we as a community, as a whole, have forsaken the worship of the Most High God and have now turned over to worshiping goddesses, whether it be through so-called black consciousness, you're worshiping the goddesses of Egypt, you're calling your wife and your mother a goddess, and all these other things that people are dealing with. Or through Christianity, you're worshiping Mary, which is nothing more than a cloak for goddess worship. In Roman Catholicism, worshiping Mary, which is a cloak for goddess worship. In Islam, worshiping the Kaaba, which in certain facets gives reverence to goddess worship. If your heart has been turned away from the Most High God to worship these things, then you can expect the same exact results that Solomon got when he turned away his heart from worshiping God and turned unto these things. Verse 6.
And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Most High, and went not fully after the Most High, as did David his father.
Right. So I just want to make one more point before we jump down, because this is what tends to happen in our communities. We'll look at the end result, and we're going to see the same thing with Solomon. We'll look at the end result of the Most High's judgment when judgment is now sent in the community. But we don't look at the steps that it took for the Most High to eventually get to that point. Like, what do we do in our community that allowed or caused the Most High to send this harsh judgment upon us? To allow somebody to come in and kill an innocent child in the community. What did we do that led to these things happening? Could it be that we did evil and continue to do evil in the sight of the Lord, and that evil goes unchecked? It's done without impunity, done without any level of judgment. Well, hey, if we're not going to deal with some level of judgment and correction in the community, the Most High will. So I'm using this as an example, brothers and sisters, so that we can see that, yes, there's an invisible force around us that's willing to protect us, and we're going to show you the instances in which the Most High is willing to protect us, but we must first operate according to a certain standard in the eyes of the Most High God, in order for him to now come in and deal righteously with us in judgment. Right? So let's move, let's jump down. It says in fact, let's read verse 7.
1 Kings 11:7. Then did Solomon build an high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon.
Right. And we know that Moloch, with Moloch worship came what? Child sacrifice. Now, we often hear that in the black community that abortion rates are, in the black and Hispanic community, abortion rates are higher than in any other community on the face of this earth. So the question is, if the Most High brought judgment on Solomon for sacrificing children to Moloch, what do you expect the Most High to do when there's an exponential rate of child sacrifice through abortion within the black and Latino community? What do we expect? We expect the Most High to just sit there and say, well, yeah, as long as you come to church on Sunday, as long as you worship on Christmas, as long as you keep Thanksgiving, you'll be fine. As long as you accept Jesus Christ in your heart and say that Christ is my Lord and Savior and so on and so forth, you'll be fine. Is this what we expect from the Most High God, or do we expect the Most High to now start making a statement amongst us to let us know that there's something within us that must be changed, or something among us that must be changed? Let's see. Now let's jump down to verse 14. We're not going to, for the sake of time, we're not going to read the whole story, but it does state in scripture that the Most High revealed himself unto Solomon twice. So Solomon had multiple warnings to change himself, to make the necessary corrections. Ask yourself the question, how many chances and warnings do we receive on a daily basis for the Most High to let us know that we must change? Stop the abortions. Stop allowing the pedophilia. Stop allowing the madness that's taking place within the Christian churches. Stop allowing the drug dealers to take control of your community. Stop allowing the murderers to put fear in the community. Stop allowing the harlotry and the promiscuity within the community. How many warnings do we receive? And yet turn a blind eye and say what? Stop judging. You judging me. Right?
Or,
I got to get it how I live it.
Right.
Right? That's the madness our people come up with. Well, the white man, he putting the drugs in the community. Okay, we understand that. We got all of that. I know, we all seen Boys in the Hood. There's no boats and no planes where the black people can bring the drugs in. We know that the government is behind it, so on and so forth. We all know that, right? But the question is, what stance are you taking in order to eliminate the drugs being pushed in your community? What steps are you taking to make sure that no pedophiles can operate within your community to molest children, so on and so forth? What steps are we taking?
Right.
We can point fingers all day at what the outside is doing to us in our community. But I tell you what, no one can push drugs within the Asian community without somebody knowing and without somebody speaking up against it and actually taking action. So what are the Asians doing within their communities as not to offend anyone, but as heathenistic as some of those customs they be dealing with and the things that Japhet be sometimes dealing with, as evil as it is, they at least have a system within their community that nothing can take place unless they know about it and have the power to either control it or defend themselves against it. Right? Let's jump down to 1 Kings 11 and 14.
And the Most High stirred up an adversary unto Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. He was of the king's seed in Edom.
Right. So the Most High took the chief adversary of the nation of Israel and stirred him up against King Solomon. Now, I'm pretty sure back in that day, either the prophets who were, operating under that kingdom or, the men under King Solomon's court could have easily said that the white man is the devil. Look at him trying to destroy Solomon. Look at him trying to war against King Solomon, so on and so forth. Look at how great Solomon is. Why would anyone like or seek to do any harm to King Solomon? I'm pretty sure they could have created many arguments at that time to point the finger at the adversary that was stirred up by the Most High God. But how many people at that time were looking at King Solomon and saying, brother, you are going the hell off. You got all of these women, all of these wives. You're worshiping all of these different gods. You're sacrificing children to Moloch, so on and so forth. Solomon, you need to slow down. How many people stood up and took that charge in this particular situation or in this, within this environment of war that was stirred up against Solomon? So yes, we can point the fingers at the police coming into the community, killing people, shooting innocent people, so on and so forth. But how many of us are going to sit back and examine what's taking place in our communities and say, well, unless we stop these particular ills, these social ills that are taking place among us, the Most High is going to continue to allow these attacks and these impositions against us. In fact, he's going to stir up the individuals to come into the community and perform the actions.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Verse 15.
For it came to pass, when David was in Edom, and Joab the captain of the host was gone up to bury the slain, after he had smitten every male in Edom. For 6 months did Joab remain there with all Israel, until he had cut off every male in Edom.
Right. So this is just going into the history of Hadad, his lineage, where he comes from, so on and so forth. Let's jump down to verse 23.
1 Kings 11 and verse 23. And the Most High stirred him up, another adversary, Rezon, the son of Eliadad, which fled from his lord Hadadezer, king of Zobah. Verse 24. And he gathered men unto him, and became captain over a band, when David slew them of Zobah. And they went to Damascus, and dwelt therein, and reigned in Damascus. And he was an adversary to Israel all the days of Solomon, beside the mischief that Hadad did, and he abhorred Israel, and reigned over Syria.
Right. So here's the example again. I'm pulling this out to show in biblical history why the Most High allows judgment, or sends judgment, or stirs up enemies and adversaries to come amongst us and to war against us, to slay us, to poison us, to do all these different things. Even though we don't agree with it and we sympathize with our people, we understand that there's certain things on our end that must be adjusted and dealt with in order for what we see in 2 Maccabees, the 3rd chapter, to take place, where we can go before the Most High and pray to him, and judgment is sent immediately. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But as long as we allow the sin and the iniquity to take place among us, the Most High is going to hold back. He's going to hold back his judgment on the nations.
Right.
Right?
And if I can add
Moving
something
on.
real quick to that. It's, obviously we have our own sin, but also, you hear that modern saying, if it doesn't affect me or concern me, so, I don't really need to focus on it. But all sin, our sin and things outside of us, for example, just because you may not have experienced an abortion or be married to go through an abortion or whatever the case is, that's still a problem that needs to be addressed in other, situations.
Exactly. And Solomon is the perfect example. When Solomon first began worshiping these gods, the whole nation of Israel wasn't worshiping these gods.
Right.
Like the whole nation wasn't worshiping Chemosh and Moloch when Solomon began. So they could have easily said, well, that's Solomon. That's his problem. As long as it ain't happening to me, as long as it ain't affecting me and my children, I'm fine. They could have easily taken that stance, but we can see that because of the sin of Solomon, being not only a leader of Israel, but being a child of law, being a child of one who received the commandments and the covenant of God, his sin affected the whole nation.
Right.
Caused enemies to come in and attack the whole nation. Like, it didn't say that enemies were just stirred up against Solomon. It says that adversaries were stirred up against the whole nation of Israel.
Right.
during the reign of King Solomon. And then eventually it led to the kingdom being divided into 2 kingdoms, which was a devastating event within the nation of Israel. I mean, sometimes we go back and we read it and it's just, just meticulous history that, we just read it. Okay, it happened. But you have to think about the devastation that this caused during the time that this was taking place, where the whole nation was now divided to where we began to look at each other as 2 separate nations and eventually became our own enemies within the 12 tribes. Right? So yes, the sin that takes place in your community Even though it may not be your sin, you may not be the person molesting children. You may not be the person selling the drugs. You may not be the person robbing and committing thievery. You may not be the murderer, but eventually the actions of that murderer will affect your whole community.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to Isaiah 49:3.
Should I save this first part?
Yes.
Okay. 49. Just going to save this real quick. We are back.
All right. Now, before we go into the book of Isaiah, the 49th chapter, let's go to the book of Ezekiel 9:4 to show that the Most High is actually seeking for those amongst us, amongst the nation, amongst the community, to speak out against the evils that are done amongst us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's go to Ezekiel 9:4, and then after that. What's that?
No, I was just going to ask a question, but that's the answer, yeah. This is the sign
Ezekiel
cry,
9.
right?
Yep.
Ezekiel chapter 9 and verse 4. And the Most High said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof.
Right. So the Most High is not looking for the person who's going to say, live and let live, or as long as it don't affect me and my house, as long as they don't bring that stuff around me, I'm fine. The Most High is not looking for that. The Most High is setting the mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for the abominations that are done in the midst thereof. Those who are tired of the homosexual imposition on the community. Those who are tired of the drug dealers and the murderers and the pedophiles and the pulpit pastors who are pimping the people and stealing money from the people. He's getting tired of all of it, okay? Mm-hmm. Or he's looking for those who are tired of all of it. Those who are tired of mosque and Christian churches raising up in their community, but the conditions of their community not changing a bit. People coming into the community and pretty much exploiting the state of our people, right? Mm-hmm. So the Most High is looking for all of these who are tired of all the abominations that are being done in the midst thereof, and he's setting the mark upon their foreheads, right? Mm-hmm. Verse 5.
Let me go back. Ezekiel 9 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
And to the others he said, in mine hearing, Go ye after him through the city and smite.
So what's happening to the others? What's happening to the others who are not sighing and crying for the abominations that are being done in the midst thereof? Those who agree with the abominations that are being done in the midst thereof. Whether they're agreeing openly or just by acquiescing and saying, well, it doesn't necessarily affect me as an individual. It's not in my household. I'm not doing it. My family's not doing it. What will happen to these individuals?
Go ye after him through the city and smite.
Go through the city and smite. So should we be surprised when the Most High sends or stirs up an adversary to go into the community and smite people within the community? Should we be surprised? Read on.
Let not your eyes spare, neither have ye pity.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 6. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house.
Right. So first and foremost, the Most High is not discriminating when it comes to this judgment. The Most High is not saying, well, because you're elderly, because you're a youth, because you are a woman, that
Right.
I'm going to discriminate in judgment.
Right.
Right? Whoever is guilty of accepting the abominations that are being done in the midst thereof, who's ever complicit with the abominations being done in the midst thereof, will be found worthy of this judgment. And it says, begin at my sanctuary. So before judgment can go on any other nation outside of us, outside of the so-called Black, Hispanic, or Native Indian community, it must first begin with us. Right? So, what can we do as people of righteousness, as those who are tired of the abominations being done in the midst thereof? What steps can we take in order to ensure that the Most High is on our side? To ensure that the Most High will protect us and guide us, as he promised in the book of Ephesians, where he tells us to put on his armor that we may be able to withstand the day of evil. How can we ensure this? Let's go to the book of Isaiah 49:3.
Isaiah 49:3. And said unto me, Thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. Then I said, I have labored in vain, I have spent my strength for naught, and in vain. Yet surely my judgment is with the Most High, and my work with my power. Verse 5. And now saith the Most High, that formed me from the womb to be his servant, to bring Jacob again to him. Though Israel be not gathered, yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Most High, and my power shall be my strength.
Right. So first and foremost, we must acknowledge that the Most High formed us from the womb to be his servants and to bring Jacob again to him. And though Israel be not gathered, yet shall I. Ultimately, we know that Christ was the, he's the utmost fulfillment of this reference. But nonetheless, it says, yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, and the Most High shall be my strength. So again, first and foremost, we must acknowledge that our overall mission is to raise up the tribes of Jacob, right? Verse 6.
And he said, It is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation unto the end of the earth.
Exactly. So we can see here, just one moment. All right, just waiting for the noise to pass. Okay. So yes, we can see here that the Bible says it is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob. So for the Most High, this is a light thing. This is an easy thing for him to raise up his people from the dust of captivity, the dust of oppression, and so on and so forth, right? To raise up his tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved of Israel, I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles. Now, in order to be a light or to raise up the tribes of Jacob, along with letting the people know who they are, so on and so forth, we must let the people know that the Most High has a standard by which we must all live. And that standard is against drug use as well as drug distribution. It's against murder. It's against promiscuity. It's against pedophilia. Right? So these are the things that can actually bring back the hedge of protection on the so-called Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian community, as we call it, right? And then through doing so, we become a light to the other nations. They can come into our communities and see there's certain things we don't eat. There's a certain way we conduct ourselves. There's a certain way we dress. There's a certain way we communicate. There's certain days in which you're not going to find any form of business being done. Right? So they're going to see these things and know. They're going to see the murder rate is down. They're going to see the STD rate is down. They're going to see the abortion rate is down. They're going to see that we didn't put Planned Parenthood out of business and run them out of the community. Right? So people are going to see this, and automatically it's going to be a light unto them. Right? It'll be a light. It'll be like the Most High himself is giving instruction to the rest of the world on how to live their lives just by coming into our communities. Right? But that can't happen if when the nations come in our community right now, when the nations come to our community, the only thing they're looking for is a sister with a big behind. They're looking for how they can get their hands on some crack or some heroin, right? They're looking to exploit. That's the only time the nations come into our community, right? When it should be a situation in which the other nations come into our community to learn how to serve the Most High God and eventually how to run their communities. Because, hey, their communities are now in shambles, right? The drugs is crossing over into their communities. The STDs is crossing over into their communities. So they need to learn how to serve the Most High God and clean themselves up. Right? But in order for that to happen, the people who were tasked with that mission must first step up to the plate. Right? Moving on to verse 7.
Thus saith the Most High, the Redeemer of Israel, and his Holy One, to him whom man despiseth, to him whom the nation abhorreth, to a servant of rulers. Kings shall see and arise. Princes also shall worship, because of the Most High that is faithful, and the Holy One of Israel, and he shall choose thee. Thus saith the Most High, in an acceptable time have I heard thee, and in a day of salvation have I helped thee. And I will preserve thee, and give thee for a covenant of the people, to establish the earth, to cause to inherit the desolate heritages.
So it says, and I will preserve thee and give thee for a covenant of the people to establish the earth. So once we rise up to the plate and stand in our rightful position, which is to be a light to the world, to represent the word and the commandments of the Most High God, once we step up to that position, the Most High will give us for a covenant of the people to establish the earth, meaning through us will the earth be established in righteousness. Right? So yes, the Most High is willing to extend himself and work with us and use us in many instances. But again, we must step up to the charge. We must step up to the plate and stand in our rightful position. Right? Let's move on to the book of Romans chapter 10, verse 1, and we're going to take it down to verse 3.
Okay. Romans 10 and 1. Romans chapter 10 and verse 1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to the Most High for Israel is that they might be saved. For I bear them record that they have a zeal of the Most High, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of the Most High's righteousness, and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of the Most High.
And that's the issue. The issue is that, number one, we have a zeal of God, meaning we have a desire to know God or to relate to something spiritual, to relate to the Most High God, but that zeal is not according to knowledge. Okay? What knowledge? The knowledge that the Most High gives us from this Bible, through his word.
Right.
So being ignorant of the Most High's righteousness or of God's righteousness, meaning we either lack the knowledge that the Most High has presented through his Bible, or when someone brings us the knowledge, we ignore it. Right? We reject it. So because of that, we go about to establish our own righteousness. We create our own standards of right and wrong. Right? And you can go up and down our community, anywhere in the earth, you're going to find some way or somehow we've come up with a way to justify something evil, but yet use that evil justification as a way to somehow standardize or justify unrighteousness.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So in doing so, we have not submitted ourselves unto the righteousness of God. So this is what's keeping us from having that spiritual relationship with the invisible that's operating on the outside of us. Okay? We cut ourselves off from that relationship because we feel like, hey, we have the answers. We have the understanding or the standard of what a life should be like, or what family should be like, what a community should look like. Right? Let's move on to the book of Mark 5:1.
The book of St. Mark chapter 5 and verse 1. And they came over unto the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gadarenes. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces. Neither could any man tame him. And
right.
always...
So we often see certain things, maybe not to this degree, but in certain instances, we see these types of spirits manifesting themselves within our communities, all throughout the earth, right? And we'll look at it, we'll just say the person is crazy, they need to be put in a mental institution, they need to take their psychotropics or their mental medicine, their pharmaceuticals in order to get better, or whatever the case may be. But none of us ask ourselves, what actions either did this person commit or were committed against this person that caused them to get to a state of mental instability, of spiritual instability, or physical instability to some degrees. Like, for example, you can have somebody in the community that just straight up acts out, seems to just be prone to either violence or mentally they're just not there. None of us go back and say, well, hold up. Could it be that this person was molested when they were 3 years old? And ever since, it played on their mind, it played on their spirit, it defiled them, it corrupted them, to where now at this particular age, they're 18, they're 16, they're 25, and now we're seeing the manifestation of the spirits that have overtaken this person due to them being molested at 3-4 years old. None of us sit back and make that examination of what causes our people to get to this point. And then furthermore, none of us are addressing the underlying issue. Like, who is this person who did this thing to this person that caused them to act out like this? And are they still within our community in a capacity in which they can cause this to happen to other children? None of these stances are taken, and therefore we get a high level of spiritual attacks within our community, mental attacks within our community, physical attacks within our community. Right? Read on.
Verse 5. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. But when he saw Yeshua afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice, and said, What have I to do with thee, Yeshua, thou Son of the Most High Power? I adjure thee by the Most High, that thou torment me not. For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. Verse 9. And he asked
Christ,
him,
number one, Salakia, just a few things. Number one, Christ understood that this was an unclean spirit. It wasn't just some mental health issue. It wasn't something that you could diagnose with a pill or an injection or whatever the case may be. It was a spiritual attack being performed by a demon or demonic spirit. Secondly, what we see through this is that the only thing that can heal the people from these adverse spirits is Christ. That's the only thing that can heal us. So how many of us resort to Christ, and I'm talking about the true Christ in our communities, to be healed of these demonic attacks? Right? How often do we resort to scripture and resort to true spirituality under the Most High God in order to heal our brothers and sisters from these things that they're suffering within these communities? Right? Read on.
Verse 8. For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. Verse 10. And he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. Now there was there nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding. And all the devils besought him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. Verse 13. And forthwith Yeshua gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out, and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea, that there were about 2,000, and were choked in the sea.
So 2,000 spirits were operating within one vessel. Can you imagine that? 2,000 spirits. And you can only imagine with some of the hells and the pains that we've been through in modern times, how many spirits we're carrying around that are affecting us in every aspect of our lives. And yet at the same time, we reject the only thing which is the true remedy, which is number one, Christ. That's the only thing. Allah can't help you. Buddha can't help you. The gods of Egypt can't help you through these situations. Your witchcraft and your voodoo can't help you in these situations. Right? So, number one, Christ is the only thing that can help you. And secondly, we have to address the uncleannesses that we have allowed in our lives. The uncleannesses that we have accepted in our lives. Like we mentioned earlier, the being complicit with some of the evils and the abominations that are done within our communities, or that are done in the midst thereof. We must address those things and eliminate them, not only from ourselves, but we have to eliminate the potential for these things to rear their heads again with others within our surroundings. And the instruction on how to do so can only come from the Bible. That's the only place you're going to get it. And I know many people say, well, there's many different ways, or why does it have to be the Bible? We're not down with that religious book, so on and so forth. But the reality is that the Bible is the only book that not only addresses these issues at their root, core, foundational level, but also gives us the solutions. It's the only book, right? Let's move on to the book. Let's jump down. Isaiah 1 and 6, and then we'll just get a few more after this before we close out, is another aspect I want to touch concerning this. We'll read Isaiah 1:16 down to verse 20. Then I think we're going to get about one more scripture, and then we'll finish.
Okay. Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 16.
Mm-hmm.
Wash you, make you clean, put away the evil of your doings from before mine eyes. Cease to do evil.
Right. So before we can address the external forces that are imposing themselves upon us, we must first examine what's going on among us. Have we washed ourselves? Have we made ourselves clean? Have we put away the evil of our doings from before the Most High's eyes? Have we ceased to do evil? And if we haven't taken these steps, what should we expect to happen to us as a result? Should we expect to be protected within our communities? Do we expect to be protected as a nation? Do we expect to be prosperous as a people? Or should we expect exactly what it is we're receiving right now, which is oppression, affliction, death, destruction, discrimination, so on and so forth? Verse 17.
Verse 17. Learn to do well, seek judgment, relieve the oppressed, judge the fatherless, plead for the widow. Verse 18.
So first you must learn to do well. You must learn to do well. You have to learn that it's wrong to sell drugs. Like you would think that this is common sense.
Right.
But you have to go into a community and convince people that it's wrong to sell poison to their people. You have to convince people that it's wrong to smoke weed and get high. You have to convince sisters that it's wrong to be promiscuous. You have to convince brothers that it's wrong to be promiscuous. You have to convince somebody that it's wrong to rape little children. You would think this is common sense, grade 1 spirituality. But we have to teach our people have to learn to do well, learn to do what's right in the eyes of the Most High God. We have to learn and be taught that it's wrong to bow down to idols and so on and so forth. To murder, right? It says seek judgment, which goes into what we were stating earlier about making the corrections within the community. If there's reports of people getting high and selling drugs and murdering, so on and so forth, we have to seek that judgment is brought forth. Now, of course, we can't murder people, but there can be some type of action taking place in which these people have to know that if you're going to do this, you have to be excommunicated out of this community or else. Right? Like in the old time, in order to put the evil away from Israel, the Most High would either excommunicate the whole family or he would kill the whole family. So, hey, if you're going to sell drugs, and hey, we know people in the communities where they are drug dealers and the family is okay with it because the family is benefiting from the drug money. So if you got that situation going on in your, that environment taking place amongst your household, then you and your family must get out of this community. Or else you're going to have hell to pay if you don't get out this community with your drug, with your distribution of drugs within our community. Okay, you're going to have hell to pay if you don't get out of our community and you're committing pedophilia against children, or you're dealing with homosexuality. Okay, so this is the stance that should be taken amongst us: seeking judgment. Right? Relieving the oppressed, judging the fatherless, and pleading for the widow. Right? These are the steps that we must take in order to get in right with the Most High God. Verse 18.
Come now and let us reason together, saith the Most High. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. if
So
ye
check
be
out
willing.
so check out the mercy of the Most High God. He says, "Come and let us reason together." Now, in reality, we don't deserve to come before the Most High and reason before him. Like, based on the sins we've committed, both individually and as a nation, we all deserve death. That's the only thing we deserve from the Most High God. But he's merciful enough to say, "Come and let us reason together. Though your sins be as scarlet," meaning you are filthy with sin, "they shall be white as snow." I'm willing to cleanse your sins. I'm willing to cleanse away the filth of your iniquities. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. So the Most High is willing to cleanse us of our sin and forgive us if, read verse 19,
If we be willing and obedient.
if ye be willing and obedient. That's the key. Read on.
Ye shall eat the good of the land.
You should be prosperous. Go ahead.
But if ye refuse and rebel, ye shall be...
If you refuse and rebel, you continue to be drug dealers and murderers and rapists and pedophiles and thieves, harlots, pimps. If you continue in these things, what shall happen?
But if ye refuse and rebel, ye shall be devoured with the sword. For the mouth
You shall be devoured with the sword. Destruction will come upon you. So, hey, as we mentioned before many times, the sword and death is what is to be expected if you refuse and rebel to follow the righteous path that the Most High has set through his only begotten Son, Christ. That's the only thing you should expect. You shouldn't expect justice to take place in the United States because there's no justice amongst us, amongst our communities. So how can we expect justice to take place on a whole nother scale? Us going to court or, taking it to trial and getting justice when there's no justice amongst our communities. Right? Go ahead.
But if ye refuse and rebel, ye shall be devoured with the sword. For the mouth of the Most High hath spoken it.
Right. Now, there's one more scripture I wanted to get. This is the book of Enoch, chapter 15, verse 8. And I wanted to read this because, as we mentioned earlier, you're going to find out that many of our people, instead of taking on the whole armor of God and defending themselves against the spiritual wickedness in high places, they have aligned themselves with the spiritual wickedness in high places, whether knowingly or unknowingly. So let's get that in the book of Enoch, chapter 15, verse 8.
Enoch chapter 15 and beginning at verse 8. And now the giants who are produced from the spirits and the flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth. And on the earth shall be their dwelling.
So we're dealing, again, remember, we're dealing with the invisible workings in our lives. We've dealt with the Most High's invisible workings, but now we must address those invisible workings that we read about in Ephesians, the 6th chapter. It says, the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Right? So these are the entities who are responsible for that spiritual wickedness in high places that's mentioned in Ephesians 6 and 12. Right? Verse 9.
Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called.
So they shall be called evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. So the scriptures, again, as we read earlier, gave us instruction on how to protect ourselves from these evil spirits. The question is, what happens when you have people in our community who not only unknowingly, because we know about our people in the churches and involved with these different religions who are worshiping these spirits unknowingly. They think they're worshiping Christ and think they're worshiping God, but worshiping demons and demonic entities. You have people in our communities who are knowingly aligning themselves with evil spirits and demonic forces. And this is mainly, you may not hear people go into it out in the open, but we often speak about this. Those who have adopted this whole so-called conscious, this black conscious mindset, have actually adopted a belief system and a mindset in which they're aligning themselves with the same spirits that they claim they need freedom from. And I'm going to show you how. They may not say it's spirits. They may say we need freedom from the oppression of the white man and the Chinese man, so on and so forth. But as we read earlier, we wrestle not with flesh and blood. The white man and the Chinese man are just vessels. But they're not the ultimate enemy in this battle. Okay? Let's read on.
Jump down to 11. Verse 11.
Yes. Yep.
And the spirits of the giants, this is Enoch chapter 15, verse 11. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offenses. Verse 12. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the woman, because they have proceeded from them.
Right. Now check this out, brothers and sisters. The book of Enoch gives us the attributes of the spirits of the giants, which are also known as evil or demonic spirits. It says they afflict, oppress, and destroy. Now hold up. Aren't we looking for freedom from affliction, oppression, and destruction within our communities? Aren't these the things we're looking to be freed from, as we claim within these different, I guess you would call different either belief systems or thought processes such as black consciousness or African thought, whatever you would like to call it. Our main claim is that we want to be freed from oppression, affliction, and destruction. The question is, how could this be possible when the very deities and the gods that you reverence and worship are responsible for your affliction, your oppression, and your destruction? How in one breath you claim you want freedom from these things, but then you give all of your power, worship, and reverence to the same exact entities and deities who are responsible for these actions? So if I'm worshiping the god or the goddess of affliction, then surely I'm going to receive affliction. If I'm worshiping the god or goddess of oppression, then surely I'm going to be in a continual state of oppression. If I'm worshiping the god of destruction, then surely I'm going to be in a state of continual destruction. And of course, you're going to get people, they say, well, we don't worship this or we don't worship that. It's a principle. It's a, whatever people like to call it. They have these funny ways of trying to explain all, what they're doing. When in reality, if I was to go into ancient Egypt or ancient Babylon and to these different places, they wouldn't be telling me that this is just a thought process or just a principle that we abide by. They would say in their language that we are worshiping this demon. We're worshiping this God. we're worshiping this, we're worshiping that. Okay? So we can kill all of this whole science. It's all science, it's all this, it's all that, it's virtue. Nah, you're worshiping demons who, according to the book of Enoch, are responsible for affliction, oppression, and destruction. Now, for our people who are worshiping these things unknowingly in the churches, so on and so forth, if you're seeking true spiritual freedom, and if you're seeking for the Most High to protect you and to make himself known and manifest unto you, then you must separate yourself from the religion of your oppressors, which really, even though they tell you it's Christ and Mary and God on the surface, are actually causing you to worship idols, demons, and deities, which are associated with affliction, oppression, and destruction. Right? It goes on to say that these spirits cause attacks. So how can we expect to come together in peace, right? Everyone want to say, let's unify, let's come together in peace. We need to come together not under a religion, but under blackness. Right? But how can we come together in unity under blackness, whatever that is? I mean, I'm pretty sure you maybe have a better definition or a better assessment as to what that is. But nonetheless, how can we come together under unity when the spirits that we're worshiping are responsible for attacks? Right? Like the spirits and the deities we're reverencing, the only thing they want to do is attack and destroy. So how can we claim we want to come together for peace? It's impossible. Why? Because we're not acknowledging the instruction of Ephesians 6, where it says, put on the whole armor of God that you may be protected from the darkness of this world, the principalities and the powers and the spiritual wickedness in high places. You've instead taken the stance of worshiping the spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, how do we know this? How can we say this? Let me give you an example. For those who have seen the series we did, Do As Thou Wilt, we showed some examples of how in certain communities, they actually go as far as saying, we should get back to the quote unquote African spiritual systems of the dark arts and black magic, so on and so forth. And you'll hear this every so often in certain communities. So you mean to tell me that you're going to forsake the armor that God have given us, which is to be girded about at your loins with truth? Like everyone claims they're about truth. And here it is, the Bible is telling us that part of our protection is truth. You mean to tell me you're going to cast away the girding of truth and the breastplate of righteousness for voodoo, for Santeria, for Shango, for African spiritual, demonic, dark art systems? Right? And wonder why there's still oppression, affliction, destruction, and attacks within our community. It says, and work destruction on the earth and cause trouble. And take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst and cause offenses. And we notice every time we turn around, there's an offense, whether it's in the Christian community, the so-called black conscience community, and the Israelite community. We have to admit, amongst those who are called to be Israelites, that yes, these spirits are operating amongst us. And if we're not careful, we will not only become victims to these spirits, but we won't have a defense in the day of evil, when these spirits now have an all-out attack and an all-out war against us. Because we've learned to accept the ways of unrighteousness, even as Israelites. You have doctrines amongst Israelites and things amongst Israelites that allow them to become subject to spirits. Things such as the Star of Moloch and the fornication that comes through so-called multiple wives and things of that nature. These are things that are allowing spirits amongst us, pride and hatred and envy. These are allowing spirits to come amongst us to cause trouble, to cause attacks, and to cause offenses. So we can't turn around and say we want unity amongst each other, but our actions and the things we are acquiescing to and are in agreement with is causing dark forces to come into our lives and prevent us from being able to have peace.
Right.
And always be in a state of offense.
I have a precept.
So it says these spirits. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, you was going?
Yeah, I was saying these. I was going to finish reading, but you can read that. And these spirits.
Enoch 15.
And these spirits.
15 and 11. And these spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offenses. Verse 12. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the woman, because they have proceeded from them.
Right. So the whole duty of these evil spirits is to rise up against the children of men and against women, because they have proceeded from them. Hence, reverting back again, this is why the Most High said that we must put on the whole armor of God. It's the only protection we have in this invisible war, in this spiritual war. Right? With that, we're going to conclude this lesson, and we're going to open up for a few moments of question and answer. So if there's any questions that brothers and sisters may have, we'll open up for a few moments. Then after that, we'll conclude and allow you to enjoy the rest of your Sabbath.
Okay, let me save this real quick. Okay, shalom, we're back.
All right. So brothers and sisters, we're going to officially open the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. If not, we will conclude with this Sabbath. Yeshaya Watts, that's the first question. May you please break down 1 Kings 11 and 21.
1 Kings 11.
Let's get that real quick. 1 Kings 11 and 21.
You want me to read it?
Yes.
1 Kings chapter 11 and verse 21. And when Hadad heard in Egypt that David slept with his fathers, and that Joab, the captain of the host, was dead, Hadad said to Pharaoh, let me depart, that I may go to mine own country.
Right. So it's very, very self-explanatory. When Hadad heard, the story went out. When David died, when it says slept with his fathers, that means David died, right? And in the Old Testament, you often hear that when someone died, they requested to be buried amongst their fathers. So when it says David slept with his fathers, that announcement went out to where it came to Egypt. They found out in Egypt that David had died, and Hadad requested to the Pharaoh of Egypt to now go into the land of Israel to go against King Solomon, all right, or to go back to his own country. So this is what will allow Hadad to eventually become an adversary to King Solomon. Once David died and Joab, which was the captain of David's host, died, it gave an opportunity to where Hadad can go back to his country and eventually stir up forces to go against King Solomon. All right. Next one. And was Jacob performing a libation to Ahiah in Genesis 35 and 14? Let's get Genesis 35 and 14.
35 and 14. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, even a pillar of stone. And he poured a drink offering thereon, and he poured oil thereon.
Right. So many people may look at this today, it may be considered a libation ritual. And under our customs, the customs that we had as a people, we had customs of drink offerings and pouring out drink offerings and pouring out oil and so on and so forth. So this was a part of the practices of the children of Israel. The difference is that we did certain practices that people may look at today and kind of question the integrity of these practices. We did these things in worship and reverence of the Most High God, because it was the Most High God who provided the drink that allowed us to offer the drink offering. It's the Most High God who provided the oil for us to be able to pour out the oil. So we did these things in reverence to the God who blessed us with substance, so on and so forth. Whereas in other things such as voodoo and some of these other so-called spiritual systems, they do these things in direct worship and honor of demons. Okay, so that's the difference.
All right.
We have Yashar. Or one, if you can read that, Brother Shapat.
It says right here, one can be complicit through inaction. Not all in Sodom and Gomorrah were Sodomites. However, they turned a blind eye to the sin, which rendered them in agreement for it. They, too, were counted amongst the unrighteous and destroyed. Just last year, I walked away from a nursing program when I realized that they knew full well that every medication they give is destroying people's organs and killing them, all the while acknowledging that there are natural alternatives that offer the same or greater benefits of the medications without the detriment of the harmful side effects. Meanwhile, creating a stigma amongst the public with their narratives of, quote, inactive or unproven home remedies. The Most High dealt with me and let me know duty does not absolve guilt. Therefore, I had to walk away, but it wasn't enough just to walk away. I had to start warning all who had heard or sound the alarm and offer them information about the natural alternatives to the pharmaceuticals.
Exactly. And you see, that's the stance that, according to what we read in the book of Ezekiel, the 9th chapter, that's the stance that the Most High is looking for. Those who not only have gone as far as separating themselves from the evils that are being done in the midst thereof, but to now sound an alarm and warn the people concerning them. So that's the standard the Most High is looking for. Now, others may look at this and say, well, should I do the same thing for my occupation if my occupation is against my beliefs? And again, that's a personal conviction that you must make. Like Brother Yashar, he had to make a personal conviction as to whether, that decision was it worth the sacrifice, whatever the case may be, or whatever he had to go through in order to come to the conclusion that he was no longer going to deal with the pharmaceutical industry. And that's a decision that everyone must come to, not by us forcing you or telling you must do this, that, and the third, but that must be a personal conviction. And on top of that, you must be willing to stand and deal with the repercussions that come with it, because in some cases there will be repercussions.
Right.
So, but nonetheless, that's a beautiful example of how not only do you separate yourself from the evil, but you begin to sound the alarm and prophesy against the evil. So yes, beautiful point. Next one, praise the Most High.
And if I can add real quick to what you was mentioning, there's an FAQ which I think you actually put together, Elder Lawya, on the gathering of Christ.org website. If you go to the FAQ sections for you brothers and sisters with these kind of conflicts with How do you work at certain jobs that may require you to work on the Sabbath, for example, and other scenarios that I think the title is something like working in a wicked system or something like that, the FAQ, the specific FAQ.
Right. Working, something to the effect of working in an occupation that is against my belief system or something to that effect.
Right. And that's a good, initial kind of broad outline to give you some direction on your personal decision, what you want to do with this job.
Exactly. And I'm glad, before you go on, I'm glad you brought out that point, because again, some people may look at this and they may think that we're coming out and saying, well, look, you have to leave your job if it's this, that, and the third. That's a personal conviction, again, that you must make. So, for example, you may have someone in the military who may be in between two minds, but it's up to that person to be convicted within themselves through the Most High to take that step and leave the military.
Right.
So when it comes to these weighted decisions, that's something we all must weigh up in our spirit as individuals. But nonetheless, let's move on to the next one.
This is Praise the Most High, said Shalom. I find that the language in the Bible for me, KJV, is a little intimidating and difficult to understand. Do you have any advice on better understanding the Bible and studying it?
Yes, and that is a very good question. What I would suggest, especially because the Bible, the way it's written in Old English. I guess what people would consider a Shakespearean language. So what you may want to do is get acquainted. First and foremost, I think for me personally, it became a little bit easier understanding the Bible through the system of precepts. Now, I know your issue is trying to understand the language itself, but through precept, you'll begin to see certain similarities between words that are used, how they're used, context, so on and so forth. So that will begin to kind of develop a basic understanding of biblical vocabulary. On top of that, you may want to get yourself a regular dictionary to look up certain words that may not be familiar to your everyday English language. Things such as woke, W-O-T, like initially coming into the truth, I'm like, what is woke? Like, what does that mean? But just simply looking up in a dictionary, you'll see that woke simply means to know, right? So get yourself a dictionary. Also online, there's websites which are dedicated to giving you a list of words that are in the Bible that are no longer used in modern day English language. So just combining those three different things, of course, for you it may be different, but just doing those three different things will help you tremendously in understanding the language and vocabulary of the Bible, because it is foreign initially, right?
Next up here, much love for Judah. Shalom family, what is the full armor? I came in late. Also, I love this lesson for me and my mother are having issues and is video games bad.
All right. The full armor of God, as we discussed in Ephesians, it can be found in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12 through 18. Right. So in verse 14, it states, stand therefore having your loins girt about with truth. So we have truth, the breastplate of righteousness. You have righteousness. Your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. So the gospel of peace is a part of the armor of God. The shield of faith. The helmet of salvation. The sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And then on top of that, praying always with prayer and supplication. So that makes up the whole armor of God, right? When you say you and your mother are having issues, you may have to expound on those issues. And the question, the last one, is video games bad? As we've discussed in the past, It depends on circumstance. And I'm going to explain what that means. If you're a person who can maybe play a video game, once a week, or maybe 1 hour a day and just leave it alone and it's no big deal for you, then yes, video games is no problem, right? If you're a person in which your whole life is engulfed around video games to the point where you're neglecting responsibilities, daily responsibilities. Like, for example, if you live in your mother's house, your mother requires you to do the dishes, take out the trash, and do certain things around the household, right? If those things are neglected because you're playing video games, then yes, video games are bad, all right? In fact, in that case, video games would be on the same level as eating pork, shrimp, crab, and lobster. It'd be on the same level as breaking the Sabbath, if that's the case. So again, if you're a person who just casually, on leisure, play a game here and there, it's no problem. But if you're a person who plays games to the point where it causes you to neglect your daily duties, then yes, they are bad. All right. Why did Peter and Paul end the confrontation? Or I'm assuming you're asking, why did Peter and Paul have a confrontation? The one confrontation in particular that I can remember offhand between Peter and Paul in the Bible is when Peter was sitting amongst the Gentiles, and when the Jews came, the Jews of the circumcision came and saw Peter sitting amongst the Gentiles, Peter jumped up and acted as if he wasn't operating and eating amongst them. And because of that, Paul states that he rebuked Peter to his face. In fact, let me see if we can find that real quick, just to read that. In fact, I'll just give you the reference, and you can read that, and it's pretty self-explanatory as to why they had a confrontation. Let me just give you the chapter and verse. Right, so it's Galatians 2 and 14. Galatians 2 and 14 explains why Peter had a confrontation with Paul. All right. We're now officially reopening the chat. We're going to answer a few more questions, then afterwards we'll give you all a hearty shalom. Yeshaya Watts, if you can read that, Brother Shapat.
This says, the gospel of the uncircumcision was committed unto Paul. So my question is, was there natural Gentiles in all the churches Paul set up? Galatia, Corinth, Colossians, Ephesians, etc. Just a thought I had. And lastly, what is the best study Bible that you would suggest?
All right. Let's go to the book of Acts, the 9th chapter, to Paul's conversion. Acts chapter 9, and again, this is dealing with the conversion of Paul. Read this real quick. And this will clear up who Paul went to, because there's, of course, there's disputes as to whether Paul only went to the natural Gentiles, or did he only go to Israelites in a Gentile state of mind. So let's go to the book of Acts, chapter 9, and verse 15. It's the Most High speaking to Paul, or speaking to Ananias, who would, after Paul was blinded, he was told to go to the house of Ananias. Ananias was then told that Paul would come to his house and spend time with him. And now the Most High is explaining to Ananias why Paul is being sent to him.
Acts chapter 9 and verse 15. But the Lord said unto him, Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me, to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel.
Right. So Paul's mission was to bear the Most High's name before the Gentiles. That's both Israelites who are in a Gentile state of mind, as well as natural Gentiles, and kings. So he was to bear the word of God to kings, or the name of God to kings, most of which at this time just so happen to be Gentiles, and the children of Israel. So Paul dealt with a little bit of all aspects of the gospel. Natural Gentiles, Israelites in the Gentile state of mind, Israelites who knew who they were, so on and so forth, and kings. All right? The best study Bible to get. I'm not too keen up on the study Bibles. I myself don't have what would be considered a study Bible. Usually study Bibles are ones with the commentary, so on and so forth. There's one in particular. I'm trying to figure out who does it, who deals with the publishing. It doesn't come to mind right now, and I believe it's either Holman Publishing or Hendrickson Publishing, but one of them does a really good study Bible. Right? It just takes a little bit of research, looking into it, to see who has the best options when it comes to that. But me personally, I couldn't give that to you because I don't have a study Bible.
Much love,
Judah. Much love, Judah.
The word for the answer: me and my mom is troubled because of truth.
Okay.
Infinity.
Well, that can be very. That can be very broad. Me and my mother are troubled because of truth. Is she troubled because you? And this is a question I'm just asking you. And maybe this is something you can go back and reflect within yourself, and can probably help you in introducing the truth to your mother. Is she troubled because you're following the truth of Christ and that you're changing your life around, which is possible? As Christ said in Matthew 10:34, he came not to send peace on earth, but a sword, in which a father would be at variance with the son, the mother would be at variance with the daughter, and a man's enemies may be they or will be they of his own household. So that is possible. So is she mad with you simply because you're following the commandments of God, following the truth of Christ, changing your life, changing your diet, changing the way you conduct yourself? Or is she upset because of certain things that are being presented to her? Just some examples. This may not be your situation, but just to kind of give some insight. Usually when people get the truth, we like to aim for the jugular, right? We haven't had enough time in the truth to be seasoned, to learn how to address and deal with people and spark a conversation in which the person is not offended with truth, right? Through time, we learn how to do so. But initially coming into the truth, we go straight for the jugular. We want to go into, you ain't supposed to be eating the pork, smacking pork sandwiches out of people's hands, and, flipping over tables and emptying out refrigerators, telling people that they are, the Christian church, you're pagan, and all these different things we go through. And we expect people to have the same response that we received when we heard that pork was wrong, or when we heard the Christian church was pagan, right? When in reality, the Most High says, blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears that they hear, because the majority of people around us, their eyes have been closed and will not be open except the Lord open their eyes. So there's a situation in which the way we sometimes present the truth can serve as an issue, can cause variance when it comes to the truth. But I'm going to take the side of your mother is upset with you because you're following what's right. You're actually keeping the commandments. You are living by example and not just being judgmental and condemning your mother. So if you're dealing with that aspect of truth and your mother is upset with you, the only thing you can do is continue on the path of righteousness. And eventually, believe it or not, your mother through time will see the benefit of the changes that are made in your life, and she herself will have a choice to either make changes in her life, or she'll just continue in the path that she's currently in, right? Or the path she's currently on. Now, if you fall on the other side in which you're, demeaning and condemning and being judgmental in certain aspects, then I would suggest that you change your approach in the way you present the truth. All right. Try to live more by example than just pointing out right from wrong. Right. That's the best way to convert.
Next one here is
Infinity 72.
Infinity 72. The question's kind of broken up. It says here, great lesson, Elder. Oftentimes at church we are told not to speak against leadership. If leadership is out of order, and then later on it says, should the church be silent and wait for the Most High to move?
Well, the Bible gives us instruction on how to deal with leadership if there's wrongdoing amongst leadership. All right. And let me give that information for the person who asked about the study Bible. It's AMG Publishing that does the real good study Bible. Put that in the chat, AMG Publishing. All right, I'm sorry, I referred to Yashar earlier as a brother, but it's a sister. I'm sorry, because the name Yashar is masculine, right? So I automatically assumed that it was a brother, but the feminine form of Yashar is Yashara, just for future reference. Right. So now we're dealing with the person is asking, how do we deal with leadership that's not operating properly? Let's deal with that. Let's go to the book of Timothy. 1 Timothy is the 5th chapter. First Timothy 5:1.
First Timothy chapter 5 and verse 1. Rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a father, and the younger men.
First and foremost, go ahead.
And the younger men as brethren. Excuse me.
Right. So the scriptures tell us that rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a father, and the younger men as brethren. So first and foremost, according to scripture, the Bible says, do not rebuke an elder. Now, does this mean that an elder cannot be corrected? Let's see. Let's jump down to the book of 1 Timothy 5:17.
Let the elders that rule well be counted worthy of double honor, especially they who labor in the word and doctrine.
So those who labor as elders in the word and doctrine, it says, let them be worthy of double honor. Read on.
Verse 18. For the scripture saith, thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the corn, and the laborer is worthy of his reward. Against an elder receive not an accusation, but before 2 or 3 witnesses.
Right. So there's a such thing as correcting an elder, but that accusation or that correction must be with 2 or 3 witnesses. Okay, which means you can't go and build an accusation or report against an elder with just one witness. There must be 2 or 3 witnesses who can confirm that what is being said is true. Okay? And with that comes correction. Right? So according to scripture, elders are not infallible, are subject to make mistakes. And if there are cases in which sometimes someone may be in a different area or whatever the case may be, and they feel that things are not right, then we have amongst this church, which is called incident report, through which if those things are submitted, then a council will be held to investigate what's taking place to see if there is wrongdoing amongst any leader of this church. All right. But yes, there's a way in which you can correct elders. Let's see what else we have here. Beulah, 1980.
The 12 tribes, Heliodorus, have separated themselves and live in their own separate communities and invite the public to join them for their Sabbaths. Their lifestyle is a bit similar, like the Amish.
Okay. Not too familiar with, I'm not sure if this is a group, 12 tribes or Yellow Delis. I'm not too familiar with them, but okay. And hey, there's a lot of notes that can be taken from the Amish community. Believe it or not. The way they control their what they consume is actually, created and grown amongst them. The shield and the protection they put within their communities from the outside world, from the influences of the outside world. Now, of course, we can't speak to what goes on in the inside of these institutions. I mean, there's always stories that come out from these certain institutions that, even though they try to protect us from the outside world, there's things going in from the inside or going on from the inside that must be corrected. So I can't speak to those things, but nonetheless, there are some notes that can be taken from the Amish community.
Last one here. I'm awake. If Solomon continued with the destruction of our nation, why was he considered to be so wise?
Right, and that's a good question. And basically, Solomon was considered wise based on the wisdom he possessed before he went off and dealt with marrying all these women, all these strange women, adopting the worship of their gods, so on and so forth. Before that, he was the most wise man on the face of the earth. And even in 1 Kings 11, the 11th chapter, it tells us that it was in Solomon's old age that he began to be taken. And we know that according to scripture, sometimes when a man goes into old age, he starts to lose his wits. He starts to lose his sharpness. So he was wise initially, the wisest man on the face of the planet, but eventually through time, through old age, he began to be taken by spirits. So that's why the Bible calls him wise. Not for what he did after his sin, but before his sin. All right. So with that, brothers and sisters, I want to say thank you all and shalom for participating in this week's Sabbath lesson. You can hold on. I'm pretty sure later, Elder Gabar and the brethren over in the GOCC NYC will continue on with your Sabbath experience. Until then, until next time, we want to say bless you all and Shabbat Shalom.